Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Ferghal Armstrong, and welcome to Cracking Addiction. And once again, we've got the good Mr. Stephen Hurd with us. Hello, Steve.
Hi, Ferghal.
How are you today?
I'm pretty well, and you?
I'm pretty good. So I thought we'd try and get through the final tranche of risk factors for lethality in the context of family violence. Um, One of the risk factors that we haven't yet talked about is the behavior of perpetrators towards pets and property. What do you think about that as a risk factor for family violence?
Yeah, the violence against pets and animals is an identified risk factor.
Mm.
The rationale around that is to get to the victim. Typically, the pets are part of our families these days.
Yeah.
They might have been otherwise many years ago, but pets are becoming part and parcel of families. And what perpetrators can do is see that relationship and see if they can make threats to the animal that will change, potentially have an impact on their partner more than having a threat, than threatening the partner herself. Because her choices then are, well, her decision making may be along the lines of well, I can withstand your violence, but I'm not going to let you harm my dog, or my cat, or my pet. And then so that's protective of the pet.
Yeah. You've got elements of control there. You've got, and as you say, I can withstand the punches, but not anyone else. Again, for me, that incident highlights the narcissism and the psychopathy behind that behavior, where animals and people are simply seen as extensions of themselves and their rights. And it's all about object possession. There's absolutely no shred of mutual respect.
Absolutely none. But it's about this perpetrator wanting to get their own way through whatever means they've got at their disposal in their own personal skill set. All I can say is harm to pets, whether it's threatening to pets or direct physical assault, is a risk factor. If we hear that in the story of a victim or a perpetrator, even, then that speaks a lot around the family violence risk. The other aspects of pets is a woman will stay in a relationship because of the pet. If she's not able to go somewhere that accepts the pet, accommodation or refuge or other sanctuary, there'll be no way she would leave. So in some sense, it's treated very much like a child. You would a child.
Yeah.
That same connection. And
pets are as important as children.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's sort of that's seen and targeted by a perpetrator for their own need for control.
Yeah. And I can just hear the following phrases reverberate. Look what you made me do, or I had to do that. She made me do it. Yeah. Look what you made me do. You made me do this.
Yeah.
It's your fault that the pet is dead.
Yeah. And that kind of narrative of blaming the other, putting the responsibility on the other, it's not strictly a risk factor, but it does go into our assessment of a level of perpetration. Having that blame, justification, minimizing and denying violence all go into an attitudinal set that perpetrators generally have.
Yeah. And really, it's when you're ready to kill a pet, you're almost there to kill a partner, aren't you?
I'm really not sure if I can comment on that. I would hope not.
Well, I mean, that's what we're talking about,
Well,
isn't it? You know,
this is
when partner,
yeah, and
it's only a small step, you know, because
no,
if a pet is a family member,
no, and we do have to be clear. These risk factors we're
mm,
talking about, it's not the risk that family violence is going to happen. It's the risk that the partner is going to get killed. And
yeah,
that is the risk. It's not about we've identified family violence is happening
mm,
by
mm,
hearing any one of these risk factors.
yeah,
But the case for, if we want to build up a case, want to build up a formulation
mm,
or levels of risk, really rely on us knowing and appreciating how these risk factors might be disclosed, might be talked about. Then it's up to me as
yeah,
the clinician to interpret them and
mm,
uh, and build a set of the current risk factors that then go into play as to is it um, well what level of risk it will become.
yeah, yeah.
But
And let's not forget, I mean, you know, as squeamish as this sounds, or as difficult a conversation as this is, let's not forget there's one basic fact: more than one woman a week dies as a result of violence from a current or ex-partner.
that's right, and that's not changing.
That's not changing, no, not quickly enough.
No,
Um, let's talk about jealousy,
jealousy.
because that's a risk factor for lethality. But how do you define jealousy?
Well, what sort of comes to mind, I guess, when you talk about jealousy? It's obsessive. It's obsessive jealousy. I think we've touched
Mm,
on it a little bit around that idea of multiple phone calls, multiple texts that might get
mm,
interpreted by the female partner as a sign of love or whatever.
mm,
It could be exampled as of accusing the partner of cheating,
mm,
you know, with a friend down the street or the person down the street or the boss or whoever it might be. It could be how else could it be interpreted, or how else we might hear that? Because we're not going to
well,
we're not going to say we're not going to hear from a perpetrator or a victim they're jealous. We're just going to hear these
no,
scenarios.
we're just going to hear these behaviors.
Yeah,
I mean, I think when I hear jealousy in this context, I am also reminded of what you would call Othello Syndrome in psychiatry. Especially, there's a range of jealousies, there's a range of jealous behaviors, but when you get to the point of delusional jealousy, you know the story of Othello from Shakespeare.
please tell for those of us who don't.
Well, you know, Othello was basically a very successful general, and I think he was in Venice. And he was basically made to become convinced of the infidelity of his wife by a colleague called Iago. And ultimately, Othello ended up killing his wife. I think his wife's name was Desdemona. Well, that's the story, yeah. And so that's where we get the phrase Othello Syndrome, which refers to delusional jealousy, and that's a risk factor for death because if you've got someone who is delusionally jealous of you, and you might just say hello to a passing stranger or give directions to a passing stranger, and that might then engender so much jealousy that then triggers violence, which then leads to death.
It could easily do.
So
It could easily
it's
do.
it's actually very, very, very dangerous to
Yeah.
have a partner who's suffering from that. And whilst that is a mental illness, that's really an extreme description of the range of jealousy that we can see.
I recall a little scenario I did provide in one of our first episodes when we were talking about family violence and control, and I think I
Mm,
painted a scene at a nightclub,
hmm
and
Yeah,
and the male goes off to the bathroom and comes back and finds the partner's talking to a guy at the bar, and
yeah.
then how do we picture what happens next? In the
Mm.
jealousy side, well, there may or may not be an altercation at the bar, but chances are there'll be repercussions back at home.
Yeah, wait till you get home.
Wait till you get home in the
And
quiet
I need
of
to
the
sort
home.
you out. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
What about sexual violence as a risk factor for lethality?
it is classed as a high risk factor.
Hmm
Again, it comes in a range of forms. of, at one end is rape.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess when I talk about rape in relationships, it was only in the 90s. It was only in the 90s that rape was made illegal within marriage.
Yeah.
Prior to that, it wasn't. How could it be
a
rape?
man's right. How could it be? Yes, it was a man's right.
Exactly. And a wife's role to be obedient.
Male privilege again.
Absolutely. And that maintains.
Mm.
But to really do its service, I really can't talk about it. I'm in the sense of, well, I'm a man.
Yeah.
I could trivialize it to say it includes such things as belittling my partner's appearance, in public at a friend's barbecue or whatever. But the significance of it, I really can't grapple with. I haven't experienced it, and I can't speak for that experience. So I feel a bit uncomfortable in really trying to describe it. Probably a man's view, though, in the sense of it's a power we have. There's rape used in war to control groups, and exerting what we say is our need, our biological need, over someone else's right to safety.
Well, I was going to say actually it's not necessarily about biological need. It's more about dominance and control. When it's used as a weapon, it's not about needs or biology necessarily.
No, well, that would be the naive argument, but rape isn't about sex. Yeah, rape is about control.
Which feeds back to the original wheel, the power and control wheel, doesn't it? Sexual violence is part of the power and control wheel that we talk about, that we've talked about in previous episodes. And for me, one of the most interesting questions that I find very telling is, what happens, or what would happen if you said no to your partner? When the context has been set that we are actually having a discussion around family violence, and when the victim understands that we're trying to do an assessment of lethality, it is one of the questions that I ask. I ask, what would happen if you said no? And I suppose really a question before that I would also ask is, do you find yourself acquiescing to intercourse?
What sort of answers do you get?
I once had a woman look at me and goes, all the time. All the time. And then my next question is, well, what would happen if you said no? And then I was told, well, I never said no because I fear the consequences.
These aren't unique behaviours. All these risk factors, the parent control wheel, they're not unique behaviours. They're systematic across the male gender as things that we as part of that gender do.
Yeah, I suppose we've been through a number of risk factors over a number of episodes, and I think really it's really important to always bring it back to the fact that why are we even having these conversations? And really, we know that family violence is a gendered behavior. It's a choice. It's power and control, and there are factors that make it more lethal. And so you cannot shirk from the responsibility that you have as a clinician to address these issues properly.
Yeah, and we're starting to structure ourselves up to be able to hear the story in a family violence context, evaluate the risk based on these risk factors, identify what risk level that person might be at, and given that risk level, there are a set of responses that we should enact.
Yeah. Look, we've run out of time again, Steve. I want to thank you for your expertise, and I look forward to chatting with you again very soon. Thank you.
Same here, Ferghal. Thank you.
That's all for today, folks. My name's Dr. Ferghal Armstrong, and this has been Cracking Addiction.